Coming in at number 10, we have Sean Flynn. Even though it seemed that war is just non-stop carnage without any rulebook to slow things down, I mean, it might be like that, I've never been there, and like most things in the world, when you're actually part of it, it's mostly very different. And that's not an invitation to take me to war, I never want to go. But what I'm talking about is things like don't kill civilians. They got nothing to do with the conflict. Don't use certain weapons that are considered to be inhumane. And journalists are allowed to work in the area without having to worry about being attacked by the other side. Well, the thing is, it's war and people aren't always going to follow these rules. Now, this guy wasn't a soldier, but he was involved in one of the biggest wars in American history as a photojournalist. He was working in Vietnam documenting everything that was going on, and then him and his fellow journalists were captured by Vietnamese guerrillas. People don't know why they were captured. The Vietnamese forces might have thought they were spies. They might have known that they were journalists, but for whatever reason they were captured. After that, no one knows what happened to them. They might have been taken behind enemy lines and then sold off to other people, or they might have escaped and got lost in the wilderness and passed. But to this day, the fate of those two men is still a mystery. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out.
In our number 9 spot today, we have Boris Weisfeiler. Boris Weisfeiler was a Soviet-born mathematician who was living in Pennsylvania. One winter in 1985, he decided to take a nice little trip to southern Chile to do some hiking and escape the bitter cold. Unfortunately, this is where he ended up disappearing. The last time anyone saw or heard from Boris was in January of that year, and not too long after his last sighting, his backpack was found by a river. This discovery had many people speculating that he may have drowned while trying to cross the river, which is just terrible. But since a body has never been found, there are of course people out there who speculate further. Some people out there believe that Boris may have been abducted. Apparently in 2000, there was enough evidence of a kidnapping that 8 different people were actually arrested and charged with the crime. In the end, however, the case was closed due to the statute of limitations, which seems like that shouldn't have been a factor, but I guess it was. This is just one unsolved mystery that I hope one day we find the answers to.
Next on the list, we have James Van Fleet's troops. Van Fleet was a lifelong military man. He fought in 3 separate wars. Just to have the Constitution to go through that much carnage would be incredible. He was sent over during World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. During the Korean War, he was leading a troop of men into action and then something went horribly wrong. Even though Van Fleet was a skilled soldier who had seen action many times before, for some reason a large percentage of his troops went missing. It's suspected that they might have walked into an ambush, or that some of the men deserted the situation to try and find refuge somewhere they could have been safer. The whole thing is still shrouded in mystery. Coming in at number 7, we have the Fort Hood soldiers. For this, we need to head over to Fort Hood, Texas. Now, even though I would never want to go to war, I find the whole experience fascinating. There is a massive psychological effect of seeing warfare. There are a few cases where people have been able to walk away from the whole experience without it affecting them very much, but for other people it seems like it sticks with them for a very long time. And then those ongoing effects might stick with your platoon. In Fort Hood, Texas, there has been a series of missing soldiers that people cannot explain. There seems to be something going on over there that is causing people to snap. On 2 separate occasions, people have opened fire on their fellow soldiers, and since then 12 different people have gone missing. Now, 2 of them were found, but they were not alive. Could these people be running away from the military because they're finding out that this life is not for them? Or is there something that the fort is trying to keep secret and some reason they needed to take people out? No one knows why so many troops have gone missing within the American borders, but it has been raising a lot of suspicions. Next on the list, we have Bo Bergdahl. Bo was fighting in the military around 2010. He was over in Iraq, he was serving with his troops, and then out of nowhere, he would disappear. There was a search launch for him, but it would seem that he was lost to the world. People thought that he might have been killed in action, or that he might have ran away from his post from the stress of being out there, but the answer would actually have been darker than both of those. He would pop up in a Taliban video. He had been taken prisoner by the terrorist organization and was now pleading on the video for his American government to do something to bring him home. Next on the list, we have Aflon Bukowski. You think one of the coolest parts of being in the military would be gathering intelligence. If the movies paint the picture accurately, then it would be like going in as a spy to get all the info you need so you can come back with your master plan to save the day. Well, even though we know that's nowhere near the truth, you would hope that things wouldn't go like this. Aflon was doing his reconnaissance for the Americans during the Vietnam War. He was with 7 other people on board a plane that was flying over Laos. For some reason, the plane was spotted and they were shot down. This led to a recovery team having to move in and get the men out of there. One of the 7 men was killed in the crash, one of them was taken prisoner, and 4 of them were recovered by the American forces. But no one knows what happened to Aflon. Maybe he was able to make it out when the plane crashed and he thought he could make his own way back. Maybe as the plane was going down he tried to jump out and landed somewhere in the jungle but was never seen again. Or maybe he was taken prisoner and the Laos government never told the Americans about him. To this day, no one knows where he went or what happened to him after that flight. Next on the list we have Shelton Charles E. This was something that I thought was very interesting. You can go missing in war for years and people will have no idea if you're alive or dead, and then you'll just pop up again. During the Vietnam War, Shelton was tasked with doing some flyovers and taking pictures. It sounded like it should have been something fun and relaxing, but I don't think there's anything in the military that is fun and relaxing. And this trip to grab these photos would have been extra stressful. During the flyover, his plane caught fire, and that's pretty damn serious. I don't know if you guys have been on a plane or know that much about aviation, but when you start to see fire when you're up in the sky, there's a good chance that you're done for. Now this plane went down, but he was able to call for rescue before he hit the earth, and he survived the crash. Now your boys should have come right for you to save you, but there was weather conditions that made it horrible for them to come in and making it impossible for the men to get there to save their man. It took them 3 days to get through there, and by the time they did, he was gone. Now people didn't know what happened to him. That was until 3 years later when he popped up as a Vietnamese POW. The whole time he was alive and his buddies had no idea where he went. Next on the list we have the missing Milla soldiers. There has been a constant conflict in the country of Milla. The government-run military has been in a battle with the Islamic militants that have been rebelling against the country, and on March 16th the militants attacked a base. It's unsure how they were able to get in and attack with such precision, but they were able to take out 11 men, and now 8 others are missing. It's unknown what could have happened to these 8 men. They might have fled the scene when they realized the base was overrun and they need to get into a better position, or they could have been taken hostage by the militant group. 8 men could be a very strong bargaining chip in future negotiations if it came to that. Next on the list we have Sanjit Bhattacharjee. We would like to think that everyone is following the rules of war, but that is sometimes not the case. Sometimes you can be taken away and forgotten about, and that might be what happened to Sanjit. Sanjit was in the Indian Army and he was in charge of patrolling the border between India and Pakistan. Back in April of 1997, him and his platoon were out patrolling and they came back without him and 1 other soldier. Since then, his mother has been petitioning with the Supreme Court to find out what happened to her son. There is a chance that he was killed in action, but there are a number of Indian soldiers that have been taken into the custody of the Pakistani military that the government is denying. Sanjit's mother is sure that her son is one of those soldiers. Even after 24 years, she is still fighting to have her son returned home safely. That is a very good mom. And next we have the missing troops from World War I. World War I was the first majorly mechanized war. You had people on horseback fighting people who had cannons that could devastate a 5 square meter radius. The unbalance of tech was insane, and because of this, some of the battles were brutal. In the Battle of the Somme, there were 300,000 people that died. Over 20,000 people died in 1 day. As you can imagine, when people were storming into the battle, shells were falling out of the sky non-stop. There were a lot of bodies that were unaccounted for. Over 70,000 soldiers went missing during World War I. Now, some of these men might have run away to start a new life in Europe. After they saw the destruction of the war, they might have wanted nothing to do with it. And I can't really blame them. Eventually you realize that this is going to get you killed and you just want to live your life. But there's a good portion of that 70,000 that were killed in action, but their bodies were never found.
Starting off at number 10, we have Giovanni Caboto. Giovanni Caboto, also known as John Cabot, was an Italian navigator and explorer. In fact, Giovanni was the first European to reach North America's coast after the Vikings. One of his greatest successes is when he declared Cape Bonavista in Newfoundland as part of the British Empire. From doing so, he received a great deal of fame and fortune. In 1478, he continued his explorations with a journey towards northern Canada with 5 ships. However, 4 of his 5 ships were lost forever. 1 returned home after they encountered terrible weather, but the whereabouts of the other 4 ships are still unknown. So anyone want to come scuba diving with me and search for these trips? Maybe National Treasures Part 3? Any takers? Coming in at number 9, we have the Court-Real brothers. Gaspar and Miguel Court-Real were Portuguese brothers, part of a noble Portuguese family. In the 1500s, Gaspar and 4 ships went on a quest to Newfoundland with his brother. After reaching their location, he sent his brother and 3 of the ships back home. Miguel and the other passengers aboard these 3 ships arrived safely. However, it was not the same fate for Gaspar. No one knows what happened after his brother and the ships left. 2 years after Gaspar's disappearance, Miguel went on another quest looking for his brother. However, he ended up disappearing as well. Theory is that Miguel might have survived and lived at least 9 more years just chilling in Newfoundland. In our 8th spot, we have George Bass. George Bass was a British sailor, and fun fact, he became an apprentice surgeon when he was a teen. 2 good skills to have, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, George Bass was known for discovering the strait between Australia and Tasmania. In fact, they even named it the Bass Strait. In 1803, Bass decided to sail from Sydney to South America. His plan was to fill his ship with cargo and illegally sell it in South America. However, several months passed and there was no word from George. People believe that he encountered a terrible storm and died in a shipwreck. Another theory is that he was captured and forced to work in Peru in the Spanish silver mines. No one really knows though, since the ship or his body have never been found. Bringing it in with number 7, we have Naomi Uemura. Naomi Uemura was known as a legendary Japanese explorer from his multiple expeditions. Some include his journey to the highest point in North America, Alaska's Mount McKinley. He also has done multiple solo journeys, including one to the North Pole and rafting through the Amazon. In 1984, Naomi decided to do another solo climb, this time of Antarctica's highest peak, Vinson Massif. Naomi successfully reached the top of the mountain and in fact radioed that he was on his way down. Sadly, he disappeared along the way. His journal and some of his equipment was found on the mountain, but his body never was. People believe that maybe he fell into a crevice in the mountain or got buried in the snow. The last entry from his journal states, "I wish I could sleep in a warm sleeping bag. No matter what happens, I am going to climb McKinley." In our 6th spot, we have Jean-Francois de Gallo. Jean-Francois de Gallo was an accomplished sea captain. In 1785, French King Louis gave Jean-Francois the quest to explore the Pacific. 2 ships sailed out for this voyage with about 225 crew members. Throughout his travels, which were supposed to last 4 years, he kept detailed records of his findings, mapping of the coastlines and observations of any specimen or people that he met along the way. He sent all of his findings back to France. The last time the ship was spotted was when they arrived in Botany Bay in Australia. When word from Jean-Francois stopped, a search team was sent out from France to find him. There were no successful leads until 1826 when the explorer Peter Dillon was exploring Solomon Island. He noticed that the residents on the island had European swords. He thought that these belonged to Jean-Francois. Theory states that they got in a shipwreck near the island and then were killed by the locals. We are now at our halfway mark with Park Yun-so. For this next explorer, Danger should have been his middle name because the expeditions that he went on were quite unsafe and, well, dangerous. Park Yun-so was a record-setting explorer who embarked on numerous dangerous expeditions. In fact, the Annapurna Mountain is named the world's deadliest mountain, and he explored it multiple times. Man, I don't know how he did it because I'm over here scared of slipping on like a little patch of ice. Anyways, in 2011, Park traversed up Annapurna once already and decided to do it again. This time he was going to find a new route up it. The last known communication between him was October 18th when he radioed saying he was returning back to base. After that, there were no more signs of Park or his team, just his rope that had been buried in the snow. Coming in at number 4, we have Percy Fawcett. People often compare Percy Fawcett to Indiana Jones. This is due to his adventurous treks through the Amazon jungle. Fawcett has been on numerous expeditions and map charting quests all throughout Brazil and Bolivia. Through these treks, he believes that there is a lost city which he refers to as Z, or Zed if you're Canadian like me. So he thinks that this city is somewhere in an unexplored region in Mato Grosso in Brazil. With this theory, him, his oldest son Jack, and his friend Rayleigh embarked on the journey to find the city. However, they disappeared during this journey sometime in 1925. People believe that they could have died from malaria or getting eaten by jaguars. Another theory states that maybe they just decided to live among the jungle for the rest of their life. A total of 100 people, maybe even more, have died looking for Fawcett and his team. At number 3, we have Peng Jiamu. Peng Jiamu was a Chinese biologist and adventurer. He is known for his scientific journeys throughout the Loup Nor Desert in northern China. Now, this desert is known to be unpredictable. However, Peng had already conquered a journey through the desert once, and he had the desire to do it again. During 1980, him and his team of geologists, biologists, and archaeologists, all the ologists, they all went into the desert to collect new research. One morning, Peng left a note saying he was going to find more water for the troop. Yet he never returned. I don't know about you, but I think he must have been pretty brave if he decided to just split up and go off by himself like that. After he went missing, the Chinese government conducted a huge search to try and locate him. However, this turned up unsuccessful. Over the course of the years, 6 skeletons have surfaced in the desert, however, none being that of Peng Jiamu. In our second spot, we have Ludwig Leichhardt. Ludwig Leichhardt. Say his name 10 times fast. Ludwig Leichhardt was a German scientist with a love and passion for Australia. Just like the previous explorers that I mentioned, Ludwig was not a novice and had done multiple expeditions before he went missing. One of his more famous adventures was one that took 18 months while he traveled from the east coast to the northwest of the country collecting botanical specimens along the way. However, in 1848 he decided to go on an exploration from Queensland to Western Australia. With him, he had 20 mules, 7 men, and 7 horses. Hey, I don't know why he needed that many donkeys for 7 men when they already had 7 horses, but I guess that's part of the mystery as well. The last sign of his troop was when they were spotted passing McPherson Station. The only remnants of evidence left is a brass plaque attached to Ludwig's burnt gun. This was found wedged in between a tree whose trunk had the letter L carved into it. And no, not L for Lindsay. It is said that if a more thorough analysis was done on the plate, then maybe it would give us a clue on what happened to him. And for our number 1 spot, we have Amelia Earhart. Now, one little fact about me is that I am terrified of flying. Seriously, turbulence is my worst enemy, so I applaud Amelia Earhart for being so brave. Amelia was a well-known American aviator who set numerous flying records. She is one of the most well-known explorers, and her disappearance has caused ongoing wonder. In 1937, Amelia set out with her navigator, Fred Noonan, to fly around the world. They were last heard from on July 2nd, 1937. 2 years later, she was declared dead. However, they never found her body. They just assumed that her plane crashed somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. The government did not give up though, and they spent 15 years looking for her. In fact, searching for Earhart was the largest and most expensive search in American history. In 2007, a photograph surfaced which appears to be what looks like Earhart and Noonan alongside Japanese authorities. People now speculate that Earhart landed in Japanese territory and was taken into custody. However, Japanese authorities denied ever having them in custody, so the mystery continues.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Dor Bahadur Bista. Dor was a very well-respected anthropologist from Nepal. He was best known for his work with the Takali traders and also for his time as a professor at a university in Nepal. While he was known to go trekking off into the wilderness in order to conduct his research in private, he was, after all, an anthropologist, so he certainly couldn't go totally off the map where there were no other humans at all. In 1995, Dor had published a book and was feeling a little anxious about some of the negative reviews it was getting. Dor was no stranger to criticism or enemies, as many people did not like him due to the fact that he was trying to help empower people who were in a lower class. Before his disappearance, Dor told one of his friends that he was fearing for his safety and that he was considering leaving in order to ensure that nothing bad happened to him. A few weeks after this conversation, somebody saw him boarding a bus, and this was the last time anyone has seen or heard from him. It's obviously very tough to say what happened to him for sure. He had a wife and children who he left behind, and part of me hopes he didn't abandon them, but part of me also hopes he didn't meet some kind of cruel end. I hope that one day someone can figure out what happened and where he went so that his children can be offered some kind of closure.
Coming in number 9, we have Enrique Roman Martinez. Back in 2020 on Memorial Day, Enrique Martinez would go missing. His family put out a missing persons claim for him, and for a significant period of time there was nothing found. It would seem that he might have ran away because his family said that he didn't have any enemies and described him as a hippie. Seems like an interesting combination of hippie and soldier, but he just wanted to live a fun life with his family after serving his time in the military. Eventually there would be a discovery made that would help the family know what happened to their son, more in the sense it would let them mourn and have some closure. His head was found in a pier after it washed ashore. This shocked the community where he lived. The problem was that the rest of him was never found, so it was hard to find out what actually happened to him. There was no security footage of what happened to him either, so it's unknown who could have done this to him. It's suspected to be a homicide since his head was removed from the body.
In a number 8 spot today we have Ernest Preisner. Ernest Preisner was a biologist who was particularly interested in studying pheromones, even more specifically the pheromones of clearwings. His research and studies actually led to the discovery of several new species, and he was able to synthetically create a set of 21 pheromones which was able to attract almost all types of winged bugs. Honestly, I didn't know that this was something that people dedicated their lives to, but it sounds very complicated and kinda cool. In July of 1994, Ernest was collaborating on some research, and he went out to check one of the insect traps that was in the mountains of Garmisch-Partenkirchen, but unfortunately, he never made it back. Search parties were sent out, but no one was ever able to find him, and since he had gone alone, it's not like there was anybody who could testify as to what happened to him. Ernest is sadly still missing today, and I truly hope that one day we find out what happened to him on that day. In our number 7 spot today we have Natalie Christopher. In August of 2019, an astrophysicist by the name of Natalie Christopher went missing after going out for a run during her visit to a Greek island. Her partner was on the trip with her, and when he awoke one morning, Natalie wasn't in the room anymore. He called her and she stated she was out for a run, which of course is totally normal, but when she didn't return for several hours after, alarm bells definitely began to ring. After contacting authorities, searches began to take place immediately, hoping to find Natalie and bring her home safe. A few days after her disappearance, authorities explained that her cell phone had been switched off. After police, fire, pedestrian, and helicopter searches, Natalie's body was eventually found. She was found in a ravine that was in a rough mountainous area approximately 20 meters deep in the water. After a full inspection of the site and an autopsy, her injuries were consistent with a fall in which she had suffered a head trauma. This is obviously a very tragic ending to this story, but I am at least glad that her loved ones were able to receive some kind of closure for this terrible situation. In our number 6 spot today we have Pangjiamu. The Lopner Desert is known for its aggressive landscape. It has soft riverbeds and sand dunes that are known to shift. It's definitely not uncommon for an entire hillside to collapse, burying everything underneath it. This brings us to June 17th, 1980, when Pangjiamu, who is a biologist at the Shanghai Institute of Biochemistry and Cell Biology, and some of his colleagues were on an expedition in this desert. That morning, Peng noticed that they were running short on some supplies. He left a note stating that he was heading out to look for water, and he left, but he was never seen again. There was a huge search for him that involved soldiers, helicopters, police, and their dogs, but unfortunately neither Peng or his body have ever been found. Many people believe that he may have been the victim of one of those hillside collapses, but in all honesty, it could have been anything. Other expeditions have come across bodies in this desert, none of which have been Peng so far, but I hope that one day someone is able to find him. In our number 5 spot today we have Timothy Cunningham. Timothy Cunningham was a Harvard-educated epidemiologist who worked for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention before his disappearance in February of 2018. He was 35 years old at the time and was working on tackling both the Ebola and Zika outbreaks. On February 7th, he resigned from a special deployment team that he was working with. His boss explained that he would have tried to convince him to stay for a few more months, but that Timothy just seemed too ready to move on. Timothy left work on February 12th saying that he was feeling unwell, but a coworker has since explained that this was shortly after Timothy learned that he was being passed over for a promotion. The day before his disappearance, Timothy told his neighbors that they should erase his phone number from their phones. Searches for Timothy went on for almost 2 months, and during this time authorities found 4 separate bodies that did not end up being Timothy's. Eventually though, Timothy's body was found in a river and it was confirmed that he had drowned. After more investigation, investigation, it was determined that Timothy had unfortunately taken his own life. People who knew Timothy began to recount some of the struggles he had that could have led to this extremely tragic situation, but I also think it's worth mentioning that there are many people out there who believe some sort of foul play was actually involved and that it may have had to do with his line of work. It is a very sad ending to an already sad story, and I hope Timothy's family has been able to support each other during these undoubtedly difficult years. In our number 4 spot today, we have Percy Fawcett. Percy Fawcett set out in 1925 to search the Amazon jungle for what had yet to be discovered. As an archaeologist and geologist, he was looking for an ancient lost civilization called the Lost City of Z. Percy went on this adventure with his oldest son Jack, one of Jack's friends, and a couple dogs. Unfortunately, after entering the jungle, none of them were ever seen again. No trace was left, and no one has been able to find his body, despite it being almost a full century since he disappeared. Some people believe he may have been lost, perhaps he was injured, maybe he even had some kind of fatal animal encounter, but there are some people who believe he just decided to abandon his life to live a life in the jungle. At the end of the day, his lost city of Z kind of did end up existing, as archaeologists have discovered large stone cities that were hidden in the jungle pretty close to where Percy would have disappeared. It has also happened that many people who went on expeditions in this jungle did not end up making it out, so it's probably best to just stay away from that one. In our number 3 spot today, we have Suzanne Eaton. In 2019, an American biologist named Suzanne Eaton disappeared while she was in Greece. Suzanne was a scientist and professor at the Max Planck Institute of Molecular Cell Biology and Genetics in Dresden, Germany, but was in Greece at the time of her disappearance for a conference. On July 2nd of 2019, she was last seen playing the piano in the lobby of her hotel before it was believed she went out on a run, which is the last time she was spotted. It was believed for a while that she may have fallen and injured herself or something of that nature. Of course, authorities began a massive search, and it took about a week for them to find anything. On July 8th of that year, Suzanne's body was found in an older World War II bunker, and she unfortunately had been killed. This of course turned the search party into an investigation, which led to a 27-year-old Greek man who did end up confessing to this very terrible crime. In October of 2020, he was tried and found guilty, which then led to him being given a life sentence in prison. Since this terrible day, the Institute of Molecular Biotechnology in Austria has started a memorial fund in Suzanne's honor, which is aimed to support young scientists' endeavors in interdisciplinary topics. I truly think that this is a wonderful way to remember Suzanne. In our number 2 spot today, we have Vladimir Alexandrov. A Soviet physicist by the name of Vladimir Alexandrov made quite a name for himself when he came up with the mathematical model for nuclear winter. Nuclear winter is what is hypothesized will happen after large-scale nuclear war and firestorms, and it is the long and severe cooling effect that will happen to our global climate. So yeah, he's an important guy, and the concept is just absolutely terrifying. So that's a little bit about Vladimir, and in 1985 he was apparently visiting Madrid when he just up and vanished. No one really knows what happened to him, but there are a couple theories. The first being that since he was in Madrid, he might have chosen to abandon his country, which is why he was never heard from again. The second, crazier theory is that there are people who believe that the whole nuclear winter thing might have just been heavily promoted by Russia in order to convince people in the United States to protest against America and the nuclear weapons program. This theory ends with the KGB kidnapping Vladimir because he was going to expose the nuclear winter theory as being untrue, and they wanted to stop that from happening. I feel like they could have found a guy who actually believed in the theory to say he came up with this mathematical model for it, but hey, I'm not a scientist. Unfortunately, it is likely we may never know what exactly happened to him, unless Vladimir himself ends up finding a way to let us know. In our number 1 spot today, we have Ettore Majorana. Ettore was an Italian physicist who was born on August 5th, 1906 and disappeared on March 25th, 1938 under some pretty mysterious circumstances. Ettore was very gifted with math from a young age, and when it was time for him to attend university, he studied engineering first before making the switch to physics. In 1933, he went to Germany and worked on the theory of the nucleus. In the fall of that same year, he returned home to Italy, but he was very sick. While in Germany, he developed acute gastritis and was also suffering from nervous exhaustion. He was immediately receiving medical treatment, which included being put on a very strict diet. This whole situation led him to become very isolated, and his reclusive nature only grew and grew over the years. For almost full 4 years, he shut himself off completely from friends and wasn't even publishing works. In March of 1938, he boarded a boat from Palermo and was headed to Naples, but he was never seen again. Before he headed to Palermo, he apparently withdrew all of his money from his bank account, and it was said that he had traveled there in the first place to visit a friend, but that friend was actually in California at the time. On the day that he disappeared, he also sent a letter to his boss that was basically just him quitting his job. And he also sent telegrams canceling any other plans that he had made. Some people believe that he may have taken his own life, others believe he escaped to Venezuela or Argentina, some people believe that he was kidnapped, and honestly the list just goes on. I wonder if we will ever be able to find out what truly happened to him that day.